Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Dr. Sophia Grant.
And I am Judy Grant, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Welcome to this week's edition of Tusoka.
Two sisters of a certain age, conversations with a therapist and a doctor.
Judy, what do you smell right now?
Oh, I smell jerk chicken cooking.
So normally when we do these recording sessions, I bring something that I baked the night before, but last night I was out with a friend, didn't have time, so I seasoned up some chicken, drove it to Judy's house raw, but seasoned, and I threw it in the oven. So right now, by the time we're done with this session today, we'll be having some jerk chicken.
And rice.
Yes.
Again, going right back to our Jamaican roots. It's hard for a week to go by where we're not cooking something with that Jamaican influence.
Exactly. You know, as I was driving up, I called Judy just to chat, and it dawned on me, like, why am I calling to chat when I'm going to actually see her so we can chat?
Right. I think I've mentioned before that we talk 3 and 4 and 5 times a day. So kind of holding things for Tusoka can be a little challenging because we talk all the time.
Exactly. So, let's get into today's topic,
All right.
which is the first one that actually comes with a trigger warning. It is a trigger warning because it has to do with divorce. For a lot of people, divorce isn't triggering, but for me, it's triggering.
And for me, it's absolutely triggering.
So, the name of the topic today is the Big D.
So let me just back up just a little bit, Candy. So Candy and I are both divorced. And we both went through very different journeys through that process. Neither of us ever expected to be divorced, but that's kind of the way it happened. That's the way it worked out. And we thought it was really important to bring this to our audience, to let you know that we too have had to deal with this and the challenges that it creates for us personally, and how we overcome such a life-changing event.
Yeah, and you know, since we were both divorced, we thought that we would discuss my divorce and her divorce in the same episode, but damn, we have a lot of trauma. So I'm going to give Judy her own episode for her divorce discussion, and I will talk about mine. And we'll have to do mine further down the road because mine is still triggering. I mean, just thinking about it now, even though it's been 12 years, my autonomic nervous system kicks in, and I can feel my heart racing, and my hands are clammy just because we're about to hear about Judy's trauma.
Yeah.
So, and you know, this is really to share with you that you're not alone. And I think when you're going through trauma, so much of the time you feel isolated and alone, and you don't think anyone else has ever experienced it. But what I have learned is that so many people have experienced exactly what you're experiencing, the same type of emotions. Maybe there are different characters, but the same level of feeling of betrayal. So we're going to talk about Judy's journey of divorce and resilience, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to promote, resilience. So join us. So, all right, I was an outsider looking in on the trauma, but Judy, just tell us a little bit about when you were married, how long you were married, and when things started to unravel.
Wow. Okay. So before I jump into all of this, I have a box of tissue here because, like Candy said, it can be re-traumatizing to actually go back and think about what I endured. Now, granted, my life today is happy. I have an amazing husband. But when I give myself time to reflect, it's like it was yesterday. And it can still be very, very emotional for me. So bear with me as I try to get through this. So in all honesty, I forget how many years I was married. I forget how long it's been because it all feels like a bit of a blur in that regard. But I believe it was about 16 years with my ex-husband. We had three wonderful children, Maxine, Maya, and Grayson. And by the way, I approached each of them and said, hey, Aunt Candy and I are going to be discussing this on the podcast. How do you feel about that? And I really wanted to make sure it was okay with them before I shared the story with all of you. And they all gave me the go-ahead. So I thank my children for that. So I was pregnant with our second child, Maya, and I sensed something was going on with my ex-husband. Couldn't really understand what it was, but I knew something was amiss. And then when she was delivered, I really felt it. I thought, this is a different man in this room with me. He left us 3 weeks later. And
I just need to interject that when Judy was giving birth to Maya, I took care of Maxine, and like maybe a day or so before, and then the baby's born, Judy's released, and like nobody's coming to pick up Maxine. We were all talking like, where is he? Where was he, Judy?
he wasn't with me, Candy. He was not with me. So I brought Maya home, and at some point I must have picked up Maxie or you dropped her off. And, I went about caring for an infant and my 5-year-old child. And like I said, he left us 3 weeks later. And this went on for years. Me questioning what just happened, him in and out of our lives. And by that, I mean he would leave for a period of time. I would try to hold it together for myself and my girls. He would return to us for approximately 2 months. I came to realize that he had a 2-month shelf life. At approximately a month when he would return, behaviors would escalate and things would get uncomfortable. Things would get emotionally abusive, psychologically abusive, and he would leave. And this cycle continued for years. And I think I held out so much hope during that time that he would want to be with his family, that he would want to be a father and a husband, that I kept up with this cycle, this roller coaster that I could never, ever get off.
Judy, what were some of the behaviors that you mentioned?
So when he was in the home, there was a lot of alcohol being drunk by him. He would tell me that he was working late and come home, maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night. He would stay out overnight. He would, like I said, be emotionally abusive towards me, be very, very short and curt and mean. I felt that I was walking on eggshells in anticipation of his arrival. I remember making sure that dinner was made, making sure that the girls were taken care of, cleaned and bathed and ready for bed and in bed, so when he came home, he wouldn't even have to, contend with any of that, because I was just trying to make things as perfect as possible in this desperate attempt to hold on to my marriage.
What would happen if things weren't perfect?
The yelling at me. I remember him talking about how inadequate I was, that I couldn't comb our daughter's hair. I remember him telling me that I did not live up to my advertised package when we first met.
Wow.
I remember him comparing me to an old, rusty jalopy of a car that someone had in their garage, and that no one would ever want to take me out and drive me because I was such an embarrassment.
How did that make you feel back then?
Stunned. Like, am I really hearing this? Betrayed, because this is a man that I loved from the time that I was 19 years old. Horrified, and thinking, like, what did I do? What did I do to cause this? And I couldn't put my finger on anything, because I knew that I loved him fiercely, and I knew that I was incredibly committed and devoted to my marriage. Our parents were such beautiful examples of what marriage should be. And
And
all I wanted
by
to do.
Judy saying our parents, it's the Grants, okay? Our side of the family, just clarifying.
Yes. And I remember getting married and knowing that it was going to be forever, because that was the only model I had. Never ever having seen any sort of disruption in my parents' relationship. This, like, really threw me for a loop. I didn't know that this that people lived through this.
So what did you come to realize was going on with this back and forth?
So denial is a crazy thing. Felt like an an ostrich with my head buried in the sand. Because the signs were there, I just didn't want to see it. There was another woman in his life. I asked him many, many, many times, and he always denied that. But in the end, she actually validated it for me when she called me one evening.
What did she call you for?
She was worried about him because his behavior was, I guess, not so good. I guess he was drinking more. And she was worried that he was going to do something to himself. And I said, he isn't going to do anything. This man's a narcissist. He thinks he's the best thing to ever exist. He isn't going to do anything to himself. But I was curious. So I dropped off my kids at my girlfriend's house, and I went to meet this woman who confirmed their 5-year relationship.
What did you think? Did you think that you could salvage it after that? Did you still hold out hope?
Crazily enough, I did. Immediately in the moment, no, absolutely not. This is over. This is done. But the charm of the narcissist, the way they're able to lure you back with promises of things being better and them being better. And again, wanting to be that family unit, I allowed him back in my life. And of course, my family and friends were thinking, what the hell is the matter with her? And I was thinking the same about myself. I just could not pull away because I was not yet ready to do so. And with all of these huge life decisions, nobody else can tell you when you need to make that decision. You need to come upon that time on your own.
I'll have to say, as a sister, it was very difficult for me to see Judy in that space. I wasn't even local. I was away doing my fellowship. And, one time I came home to California and Judy was, like, I saw her cheekbones, not in a good way. I saw her zygomatic arch, like in a skeleton way. Judy was, I don't know, what'd you weigh? Like maybe 105 pounds or something really tiny.
Yeah.
And I think the family, we couldn't figure out like why she was tolerating this. We knew something was up, and I have to say that years ago when she met that man, I didn't care for him. I felt he had an inflated sense of his own importance. I didn't think he was good enough for her. And he did not charm me. He could not charm me. And I couldn't understand why Judy fell for it. And when she got married, I supported her. I wanted her to be happy. And I remember, as a family, like saying, do you think he loves her? And what we came up with was he loves her as much as he can love anyone. And when things started to unravel, I couldn't understand Judy's weakness. I judged her for it. And I feel bad for judging her for it. And I feel like I could have been a better sister. And I mean, it's just horrible. Divorce takes a toll on every family member. The kids, the spouse, everybody. Everybody has their trauma from it. So, Judy, what was the final straw? Like, what made you say, I am tired and I'm getting out of this?
There were so many things that happened. I want to share, before I get to my final straw, I want to share one night in particular. When, of course, we're talking about divorce and what have you. And he said to me, I'll never forget where he was when he said to me, I don't care if the kids live in shit when they're with you. When they're with me, they'll have everything.
And then he threw Beverly Hills back in your face. He says he's going to move from Granada Hills and live in Beverly Hills, and she will be living in shit.
Yeah, he told me I could live on Skid Row with the kids 50% of the time. So I want to say that during like a lot of these really dark moments when I was just being demeaned and belittled and berated, like his soliloquy about how horrible I was would go on and on and on. I remember standing with my fists clenched at my sides, saying the Lord's Prayer, saying, I'm a good person. I know I'm a good person. I know I don't deserve this. And reciting the Lord's Prayer. Excuse me. And that helped me. That was like a bit of a mantra that I had for me, and it really did help because I could focus on the Lord guiding me, protecting me, and reminding me that I was a decent and good person and worthy of more.
And reminding you of your roots. That you come from people.
I come from people.
Yeah.
I do come from people. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So the final straw was I had actually moved out with the children, and he lured me back in. And I also have to say that I got pregnant with our son, Grayson, during this roller coaster while I was on birth control, by the way. So I had moved out, and we were out for 5 or so months, but he lured us back. And I remember moving back into our home in November. And in December, there was something else with the girlfriend. I think he had been out with the girlfriend. And I said, you know what? I just need to get out. And I left the house. I left him with the kids, and I went into my car, and I drove somewhere, and I called the girlfriend. And I spoke to the girlfriend, and we compared notes as to what he was saying to me, what he was saying to her. And I then found out, back when Maya was born, the switch for him was that he and the girlfriend were also pregnant. And they aborted their baby a week after I had ours. And the girlfriend didn't say it, But she said enough, and I said, "Oh my God, you were pregnant." And I just connected the dots. And I went into the house after this conversation, and I told him I knew. And he said, "She told you?" And the weight that was lifted off of my heart, off of my body, off of my soul, in that moment, I was done. And it was shortly before Christmas. So I said, well, let me get through Christmas before I take any steps. So I kind of went about my life the best I could without really telling him I was done, but I knew I was done. And then in January, after the holidays, I told him. And that was a whole other story.
Briefly, how did he respond?
Threatening, "You're never going to live such a good life. You won't have anything. Who's going to want you? You have 3 children. You're washed up. You're not worthy." But then there were also his moments of like on his knees, grabbing my legs, crying for me not to go. That's all bullshit. That was just an act. But there was a lot of, verbal threats being projected towards me during that time. So in May of the following year, I moved out. My girlfriend helped me find a place, and I moved with my children. We had a nice little house, and we started to rebuild our lives. And we've continued to do so. But it was hard. And the actual divorce process, finding attorneys back and forth, the expense.
I was about to ask, how'd you pay for it?
Credit cards.
Yeah.
That later got me into even more trouble financially. But credit cards. And during the process, my ex-husband, who is an attorney, he finagled with his firm that he would not have a set salary. He would be paid a base salary with a possibility of bonuses. This then allowed him to reduce his income. So at the end of the day, when the court looked at my salary as in comparison to his, it seemed relatively the same. And my child support ended up being less than $300 a month for the 3 children. Mm-hmm. And I think my spousal support was like $80 a month.
Wow. So how did you rebuild? How did you kind of pull yourself together?
I had amazing support from my family. And no, Candy, you weren't a terrible sister. I just don't think you understood what was happening and what was happening with me. So I had wonderful family and friends to support me. I had my therapist. I put my daughter in therapy, the eldest one, because I felt that she needed a place to also share what was on her heart and mind.
How old was she when it began to fall apart?
She was 5 years and 9 months.
And then when it finally ended?
5 years later.
Yeah. So for 5 years, she endured that back and forth.
Yeah. It was... I feel really ashamed about what she had to witness.
Yeah, I think I get it, but you shouldn't beat yourself up about that. And let's talk about your therapist.
So it was really great to be able to have a space that was my space alone, to talk about the things that I was feeling and going through. And I didn't realize it then, but I remember when I finally came to this whole notion of switching careers and becoming a therapist myself, it was kind of to help heal myself. And I remember thinking, I need to be there to help children who are going through this with their parents, the way someone tried to help my daughter go through it. So I'm not going to lie, it was really bad for a long time when I was in the roller coaster, couldn't get off of it, and then just trying to rebuild. But throughout all of it, I knew I was a good person and I knew I was worthy of more. And I knew I was strong. I come from strong women. I come from like people who know how to pick themselves up when they have nothing and to become successful. And I am so appreciative of that resilience and the support that I had. Friends and family, therapy, journaling, mindfulness, all of those things. And my children are my greatest joy, and they will forever be that. So I thank him for my babies because they helped me get through it, because I could be joyful and I could be happy with my children. And I knew that I didn't ever want to set a model for them where they saw this dysfunctional relationship as normal. And I knew that I needed to get out of the relationship, but I also needed to get out of it for my kids so they would not accept this sort of relationship ever in their lives.
So you came out, you're a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Any other silver lining benefit besides the obvious kids that you have and the new career?
I found myself. I figured out who I was supposed to be, how I should be that person. I found a sense of freedom and independence that felt really good. And I was having fun, legitimate fun with my family, with my friends, with my children, without the anxiety and the eggshells of that previous relationship. I like who I am. Like, I'm a total rock star.
Yeah, you're my sister.
Yes. But I think it also opened me up to recognizing what I wanted for my life going forward in terms of a partner. And when I met my husband, Rick, I recognized what healthy relationships were supposed to be. I recognized what it was to be respected and honored and to be treated like a queen. And I also knew the things that I was not going to tolerate in any relationship from anyone ever. And Rick had to deal with, me coming in with some baggage, but we worked through that, and I'm happy. And if I had not gone through the pain of that, I don't know if I would be who I am today.
Now, do you have any kind of triggers, or is there anything that you can see or smell or watch that will kind of take you back to that space of negativity?
Well, honestly, Candy, right now, as I'm thinking back on these memories, it's like this whole conversation is triggering. I feel it like throughout my body. Yeah, there's some things like a movie or television show that I'll see or I'll watch or I'll read an article about narcissistic personality disorder and think, yeah, I lived that. And those memories will flood back. But they're memories. They are not my present. And I refuse to be held captive by the chaos that once was.
All right. Now, let's see. What would you say to somebody who is in a similar situation? If you were talking to a friend who was in your situation, however many years ago, what advice would you give, if any?
Well, I would let them know that they will come to a decision in their time. No one else can tell them when is the right time to step away from a relationship. So they need to trust their instinct and their own timing. I would encourage therapy for not only the adult, but also for the children because they see it and they feel it. And I would be honest with the children, of course, age appropriate as to why this is happening, why mommy and daddy aren't together. And I would also encourage them not to speak ill of their ex-partner. Their children don't need to hear you coming down on their father, their mother. They don't. I've come to realize that children recognize the limitations of their parents, and nobody has to tell them what those are. And they will come to know who their parents are with time. So, yeah, I can't think of anything else, Candy.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And those are really good nuggets of information to carry through and to live by. And I think recognizing that you're not alone.
Not alone. There's a lot of shame around divorce. And I remember one time, crying to my mother about this. And I said I was so ashamed and, God had brought me into this marriage and I didn't want to disappoint God. Divorce was not something you did. And my mother said to me, if you met Jesus today and he asked you if you'd done everything you could to save your marriage, what would you tell him? And I told her that I would tell Jesus that I tried. And my mother said, then you know what you're doing is the right thing. And when I got the blessing of my mother to divorce that man, yeah, thank you, Mommy, for that.
And I just want to interject that Mommy would have given her the blessing years before. Oh, God. Oh, my gosh. Well, oh, my gosh, you guys, thank you so much for listening. This has been kind of a heavy episode, and I will have my my divorce, my Big D, Big D Part 2 episode coming up. But I think we share this because we want you to know that you're not alone, you're not a failure, and you're not a loser.
Nothing to be ashamed of.
Because your marriage didn't last, and get help. You don't have to go through these struggles all by yourself. So thank you for listening to this episode of Tusoka. And we want to thank our production company. Ooh, we fancy.
Yes, we
We
are.
have a production team.
No Longer Network. Shout out to Kristen and Nikita.
And we also want to advertise that this is the first episode that we have recorded without them physically being here to tell us exactly what to do. So I'm kind of proud of ourselves.
Oh, I'm totally impressed, but I'm still holding out hope.
Yeah,
that
we
we've
hope it
actually
records.
recorded.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. And remember, if you have any topics that you think would be interesting for us to talk about, reach out to us at twosokapodcast@gmail.com. And please like, follow, share, comment, do reviews so we can get our numbers up and, give you more content. But again, it's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, and thank you for listening to my story and for being on this journey with us. And please remember, if you've also been divorced or are contemplating divorce, we can relate.